This is Grandmaster Boris Alterman and you're watching Gambit Guide. Today we finish the Scandinavian Gambit with part number 3, and I would like just to show you the most interesting part, that after c4, instead of standard and classical c6 move, which was just popular and still popular, black is playing the modern gambit line. And this is the e7 and e6 move. So once again, black is ready to sacrifice the pawn in order to get better development. Indeed, after d takes e6, so we can see the big difference from the normal situation. So that white has the opportunity still to take the control over the center after d to d4 later on. So for instance, after bishop takes e6 and d4, black has to use all his talents just to organize strong pressure against white's position and to get the real compensation for a pawn. I could tell you that close to 27, 30 years ago, when I just started to play chess, and my first coach showed me this opening line, and after d takes e6 said, okay, Boris, you are not forced here to capture the pawn on e6. You can first of all develop your bishop and to sacrifice the second pawn. And he suggested here this quite funny move, bishop c5. So black is ready even to sacrifice one more pawn, and after e takes f7 and king takes f7, black is ready to bring his rook to e8 very fast. Knight is coming also to c6. Same idea as from the previous two lectures we already saw. Black's bishop very rapidly comes to the open diagonal to f5 or to g4. So black, even in this position, is having quite strong compensation, but still don't forget that here black is having 2 pawns down, not just 1 pawn down. So if you like to test this position in your practice, you're welcome. I could tell you that even on master level, sometimes black is playing bishop c5, but of course this is mostly for fun. So the main theoretical line here goes, of course, bishop takes e6, and for this variation I found just quite a lot of games, and even on the top level. But of course, before I would like just introduce you with the main ideas of this variation after bishop takes e6. So first of all, we are following the game between Itzhak Gula and Miklos Galas from the Budapest Eleskes Memorial Tournament 1997. So here white has a few moves. White could play immediately d4, which is the main theoretical response. White could start with, first of all, knight f3 move. It's also possible to play knight c3 move. And even in some game between two players from Vietnam, after d3, bishop b4, knight c3 and knight c6, black got immediately quite strong compensation for a pawn, since white is not controlling the d4 square anymore. The game continued, knight f3, and here after queen e7 and then long castle, and black just got very promising position. So definitely d4 is one of the best responses. In that case, black has to play very aggressively, very actively. And here's a few opportunities. One is to bring the bishop immediately to b4, and after bishop d2, definitely black is not going to capture the pawn on d4, since bishop on b4 is hanging. But first plays queen e7. Simultaneously protect the bishop on b4 and also look at white's king. So it also, black has the idea to move the bishop with a discovery check. So let's say queen a4 immediately could be met by, what do you say? What is the best response for black? So white is just making double threat, double attack on the black's king and on the black's bishop. It looks like black is in trouble, but of course the queen a4 move is a serious blunder, which of course we takes advantage by bishop d7. So bishop d7, white's king under check, so this is discovered check, and the queen at the same time under attack. So suddenly white is going to lose in just 7 moves. So this position after queen a4 check and bishop d7 happened in a few games. I could tell you just in 2007 this way finished the game between Vingers and Spence from the Namur Open Tournament. So it's definitely better after bishop b4 check to move his knight, to move white's knight to c3. Knight e4. So now white's knight on c3 is under threat. Definitely bishop d2 cannot be recommended. Why? Because after queen takes d4, black is intending not just to capture on c3, but also to capture on f2 with a checkmate. So in the game between Rasic and Sets from the Hungary tournament in 2007, after knight takes e4 and queen takes e4, black got just very good position. It's clearly that move like knight f3 leads to the checkmate after queen takes f2. And the move like queen b3 is trying to counterattack the black's bishop on b4. Once again could be met by queen takes d4, intending just to capture with a check on f2. And for instance, queen takes b4 doesn't work because queen takes f2. And now simply queen takes f1 without complications. So black is getting winning position instantly. So we can realize that not so easy to play, and many games in this line finish just very fast. I found just a couple of games when white lost in just 7 or 8 or 9 moves. So this a gambit with e6, d takes e6 and bishop takes e6 is quite playable even in the top level. So many strong players include the former challengers for the world crown, Jonathan Spielman and Julian Hodgson and Artashes Minasian and even Konstantin Landa played the Scandinavian gambit, and I would say the Scandinavian gambit is part of the opening repertoire, one of the serious weapons how to meet white's c4 move. And I would like just to carry on with the next game played in Madrid Rapid Tournament 1988 between Andrei Sokolov and Jonathan Spielman. So which continued with d4, bishop b4 check, bishop d2 and queen e7. So exactly the line we looked from the game. It's a Gula against Miklos Galos. So the previous game. So definitely white did not answer with queen a4 check, but decided to avoid complication by playing bishop takes b4. So black's queen has been attacked, so there is no time to move the bishop away with the discovery check. So black has to recapture back with the queen. Queen takes b4. Knight d2. So right now white's pawn on c4 protected, and white even ready to sacrifice back the pawn on b2, but after knight f3 and then bishop e2 and then short castling, so black has to spend time getting away the queen from the b2. Instead, of course, not for capturing back a pawn, we are playing the gambit lines. So of course we are following the main opening rules and the main rules of playing the gambit and just keep developing our pieces. Knight c6. Pawn d4 is under attack. So white definitely could try to play d5, but that's exactly what we are looking for. So black is not going to lose a piece for nothing, but to play long castling. This is our main and most important idea. So the thing quite difficult for white, because in case you capture, let's say, my bishop after d takes e6, black immediately plays knight e4. So the knight e2 is under attack. Knight f3. So here is possible, okay, it's possible different continuation. I just could show you that even knight takes, and rook a to e8 leads white, keeps white in just very tough situation. So rook is going to capture on e6 after bishop e2 and rook takes e6. Black is just having full domination in the center. White's king cannot castle because d2 knight is hanging. White is under threat of knight to d4 when e2 bishop will be on the air. So the position is extremely difficult for white. And all this despite the fact that black is having piece down. But of course, if you are trying to look here for complications, that I could even recommend you to check a move like knight e5 with the idea to just force white knight to capture on e2. In that case, the d2 knight is gone. Some kind of a destruction idea. Let's say after knight takes e5 and rook takes d2, white is just under immediate threat of losing the game. So definitely d5 after long castle leads to the very promising position for black. That's why, first of all, Andrei Sokolov decided to move his knight to the center, knight f3. But after long castling, the pawn on d4 is already under attack. So, with no better way, white has to move his pawn, d4, d5. Once again, in case of rook a to e8, black is getting very strong position. However, Jonathan Spearman moved his bishop away to g4 immediately. One more question. If it's possible to capture on c6. The answer probably would be the same. After knight e4, black is intended bishop takes f3, then trade the bishop for knight, and then capture the knight on d2. The intermediate c takes b7 doesn't help much after king b8. So black is just going to develop his rook to e8, and as I said before, idea of bishop takes f3 is almost decisive. For instance, after capture and knight takes d2, just white cannot escape from the mating attack. So the king is still stuck in the center. White's position is absolutely lost. So how it happens that just after 10 moves, the 2600 grandmaster got in such a big trouble? So after bishop g4, white is having only move to escape from immediate loss is bishop to e2. Bishop takes f3. Jonathan Spearman is very aggressive chess player, so he knows how to keep his initiative, and just without thinking too much in such a position, he decided to trade white's already developed pieces, and in that case black's knight would get or d4 or e5 squares later on. So white just has to capture with the bishop, and after rook a to e8, once again we are under very unpleasant threats. So black, of course, ready to meet bishop e2 with simple move knight d4, and the bishop is gone. It leaves white with only move king to f1, after which white's king is lost castling rights. And in such a situation, when your king in the center and black is having such a great domination, all his pieces develop it, very soon, definitely, black's development advantage should be transposed into the material advantage. So black is going to reach here just decisive advantage with no question. Knight e4, b2, pawn is under threat. Knight takes f3 is also threatening. White has to play queen c1, covering the b2 square, but of course knight d4 takes f3, knight takes f3, rook e4, b3, second rook came to e8, h3, knight h5, so now black's knight is ready to go to f4 and then to d3. Maybe later on black's rook would reach the second rank. Andrei Sokolov is trying his last chance, so he played g3, intending to come with the king to g2 and just somehow to connect his rook h1 with other pieces. But exactly in that position, when all looks so promising for white, here is coming the decisive combination. And I believe it would be quite easy to you to find it if you realize that we have to continue creating the threats against the white's king. So black is going to play knight take g3, and after f take g3 and rook e3, white find himself is in a very, very difficult situation. The point of the combination that white just cannot protect the knight on f3. Why? Look at that. After queen d1 and queen c3, king f2 or king e2, doesn't matter so much. Black is simply playing rook takes f3 check, queen takes f3, and after queen b2 check, wow, suddenly we can find out that white's king just cannot pass the third rank. So the king should go to g1 or f1, and after queen takes a1, black is just gaining decisive advantage. After queen f1, simply rook e1 or king somewhere g2 or h2 could be met by queen takes a2. And once again, white cannot protect his king. Queen f2 will be met by the same pin after rook e2. So after we discover this combination, the only chance for white to continue the fight is to go with the knight to g1. But in that case, black is continuing his strong attack by queen f6, intending queen f6 check with a mating attack. For instance, after rook b1, queen f6 check, king g2 and rook e2, white's king is going to be mated very soon. For instance, knight takes e2, rook takes e2, and after king g1 we just play queen f2 and the checkmate is coming. So once again, after queen d6, white has no time to protect position of the pawns on the king side. So white played rook h2, but black is continuing his strong attack against white's king. Rook takes pawn on g3, queen b2, queen g6. So black is step by step creating the mating net near the king side. So knight now is under threat. Only move once again is to go with knight away to e2. Why? After rook g2, black is simply destroying white's position thanks to the temporarily hanging rook on a1 after rook take g2, queen take g2, and black to move and win. I believe you can easily discover the queen f6 move, which is a fork, double attack. So the queen attacks simultaneously the king on f1 and the rook on a1. So it's a very bad sign for white that white cannot move his rook from the second rank. So it's knight e2 is the only move, or in that case black simply could continue with rook f3. So white has another move, king f2, which Andrei Sokolov played, but then rook comes to e3. So black is just connecting his rooks, and white's king cannot escape from the decisive queen f5 check. Or after knight e2, rook f3 check, king e1, queen g1, thanks to the pin of the knight on e2. Black is finishing the game quite easily. Queen takes h2, and Andrei Sokolov resigned in just 26 moves here. 26 moves, and white's position was completely destroyed thanks to the sacrifice in the Scandinavian gambit. So you can see that even on the top level, to defend white's position is quite difficult, and you have to be very good prepared for fighting this aggressive opening line. Finally, I would like just to show you today where today's theory stands. So the best continuation for white here is knight f3. So as we saw in the previous game, the d4 after bishop d4, bishop d2 and queen e7 leads to the very serious compensation for black. So all black pieces are very fast coming into the game. That's why before playing d4, white has to invite his kingside knight into the game and to be more careful with his king. So it's necessary to think over about the completing the development of the king side and then to castle. So after knight f3, black more or less forced to play knight c6, and d4 leads to the critical position. So the problem here is that after bishop b4 check, bishop d2 and queen e7, white is not forced to capture on b4 immediately. White also cannot play d5 definitely, because at least bishop takes d5 discovery check. White cannot play bishop e2 because bishop takes c4, and black is not just winning back the pawn but is having also the great domination in the center. So white more or less forced to play quite tricky move, queen e2, which just avoids immediate loss of the pawn on c4. So now black cannot capture on c4. Queen takes e7 leaves the c4 bishop unprotected. So for keeping initiative, black has to play long castling. And this is a critical position of the opening line. So white has no time for playing knight c3. Knight c3, knight takes d4. So the d4 pawn you also cannot protect so good. So it's absolutely necessary for white to play d4, d5. And because the white's queen on e7, any kind of immediate sacrifice on d5 not working so easily. Because move like bishop takes d5 just leads to the tradings. So white is just capture on e7, getting rid of the black's strongest, most powerful piece, the queen. So the game instantly going into the endgame where black of course has some compensation for a piece, but of course it's a big question if this compensation enough. That's why move d4, d5 force black to look for other alternative. And bishop takes d2 is the main line. After knight bd2, black plays knight b4, intending knight c2. So this, I would say, modern theoretical position is probably the most important for evaluation, the whole line of e6 in the Scandinavian gambit. So the big question, if black could successfully bring all his pieces in the game and to create the strong threats against white's uncastled king or not. Let's say move like knight d4, probably not so strong. White is moving once again with the same piece after rook h to e8. It's quite difficult for white to play. Let's say long castling could be made by knight takes a2, and black is getting very strong attack after king b1 and queen b4, also threatening just to escape with the bishop. For instance, after d takes e6, black even can play knight c3 with a check. The pawn on c3 spins and queen on e2 is gone. So after queen b4, king takes a2. At least we can just capture, at least with a knight to d5, still keeping very strong position. Look at the situation after takes and bishop takes. The e2 queen is under threat, d4 knight is under threat. So black is just having fantastic compensation, very strong attack against white's king. So long castling is quite dangerous in that case. So what else we can see? Definitely d takes e6. Hardly can be recommended because rook takes d4, and once again black is doing fine. So instead of playing knight d4, white probably has to look at position after long castling. But even here, it's quite easy to find the compensation from black's point of view. After bishop f5, suddenly the queen cannot be captured. You see, after queen takes e7, black is coming with a nice checkmate. Knight take pawn on a2 and white's king in the mating net. After b3, knight d3 just puts white in the totally losing position, totally lost situation. Definitely king goes to b1 onto c2, and in that case knight f4 just finish the game. The queen is gone. So it's just very interesting that even in such a situation after queen e2 and knight b4 is not so simple for white to get rid of black's strong initiative thanks to the better development, which is quite natural when we play the gambit line. So one more game after long castling, bishop f5, continued rook e1, but of course this also cannot save white from troubles after knight takes a2 check, king d1 and queen b4. So black is intending queen b3, black is in a4, black is intending to bring the rook to e8. The game between Joel Fernandez and Michel Lopez from the Merida tournament 2002 continued here. Queen e5, bishop g6, g3, rook h to e8, bishop h3 check, king b8, queen d4, c5, so attacking the queen, force white's strongest piece to move to f4. The white's main problem is that after queen takes b2 later on, white's king just cannot be safe from the decisive mating threats. After king a8, bishop f5 and queen takes b2, it's already time to call it a day, since after rook e3, rook takes e3 and f takes e3, queen c1, the rook on h1 is gone and black is getting decisive material advantage. So with this quite interesting and quite modern gambit line, I would like just to finish our course about the Scandinavian gambit. I believe that this opening weapon you can include into your repertoire and start playing it very successfully. Thanks everybody for watching. If you have any question, you can leave me a message on Internet Chess Club. So my handle is Ariela. I will be happy to answer and to help you. See you next time. You were watching the Gambit Guide.